Hey everyone, welcome again to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast where we talk about movies off of the 200 best horror movies of all time list from RottenTomatoes.com. My name is Clay, and with me as always is Amanda. Amanda, how are you?
Oh, I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good. I'm actually, I'm very excited that we got to do this movie.
Good.
We usually, this is our 10th episode. And if you've been listening to the show, you should know that every 5 episodes we take a jump off of the Rotten Tomatoes list and do something that is brought to the table by either me or Amanda, and this was Amanda's choice.
Yes, it was.
Notable movies that are not on the list that we would like to talk about. And this week we will be talking about the Innkeepers. Now, obviously you brought the movie to the table. I had seen it once before, years ago, and I had enjoyed it, and it's always been one of those where it's kind of like, yeah, that was all right. That was pretty good. But I had never really had the urge to go back and revisit it, so I'm glad that we did. But why did you pick this one?
I picked this one because it was one of those ones that I sort of stumbled on unexpectedly with no real recommendation or foreknowledge of what it was about. Mm-hmm. So when I listened to it, when I first watched it, I was kind of blown away because I had never heard of the director, any of the actors, or the movie itself. And so when I watched it, I just remember like walking away really satisfied.
Yeah.
So I wanted to revisit it. I wanted the opportunity to sort of see if it held up at all.
Yeah, Ty West is sort of the, as far as horror directors go, he's sort of the king of, that guy. In that he makes solid movies that that don't really get a lot of traction for some reason. He's a very indie horror movie director who tends to make pretty solid movies. He has
not
one,
like an auteur or anything.
Yeah, he flies under the radar quite a bit, and I did want to talk about that a little bit later on. He has one that is on the list called House of the Devil, which I know you have not seen, right?
You're correct.
Well, I think if you like this one, I think you will enjoy House of the Devil. So I'm looking forward to getting to that one.
I've been looking forward to it as well.
Yeah, excellent. And this one, again, like I said, is not on the list. However, it does have an 80% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's another reason why I picked it.
Yeah.
Because it's actually really highly rated.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's not on the list is interesting, I think.
Yeah, there's something in there that I do want to talk about later as well, because there seems to be a huge disparity between the people who like this movie and the people who absolutely hate it. And if you go to the Rotten Tomatoes, you can see that the critics seem to really enjoy it, but the audience does not. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that a little bit later on. But
sure.
Yeah, I guess we will play the trailer, and we will be right back with the Innkeepers.
Do you know the story of Madeline O'Malley? She was the woman that died here in the hotel. She hung herself after her fiancé stood her up on their wedding day. And ever since then, people have reported seeing the ghost of Madeline O'Malley roaming the hallways waiting for her lover. Some say she's even looking to take up a new one. This is our last weekend open, so we've got to find some proof that Madeline O'Malley really exists before this place closes down.
I have my microphone so we can make do with EVP investigations.
Yes, I'd like a room for the night.
Since the hotel is practically empty, we might have a good chance of making some real contact.
What was that?
Did you hear that?
Hang on.
You want to communicate with the spirits in this hotel? I can help you do that.
What do they want?
To live. You mustn't go down into the basement.
Under a blanket of blue, just you and I beneath the stars, in the arms of sweet romance. The night is under a blanket of blue.
All right, The Innkeepers from 2011, directed by Ty West, written by Ty West, starring Sarah Paxton, Pat Healy, Kelly McGillis, and I was going to be snarky and say and also featuring a, quote, must be friends with the director cameo from Lena Dunham, but Girls actually didn't come out until 2012, so she might have just done this as just a regular job. I don't know. She was not like she was not like capital L, capital D Lena Dunham at this point.
Yeah, she was not a thing yet.
Yeah. But yeah, that's basically it. There's like 5 people in this whole movie.
Yeah.
And what happens in this movie, Amanda?
When 2 employees at a New England hotel decide to investigate stories of hauntings and ghosts, their curiosity awakens an unwanted presence. That's it. That's the summary.
All right. That's, yeah, I mean, that kind of sums up the amount of action in the movie, so.
Yeah. So a few things you'll find in this movie include GeoCities websites, the high-stakes world of the service industry,
yep,
your terrible college boyfriend, and a high probability of questionable parenting.
Yeah, we stretched it a little bit thin on this one, but I think there is enough evidence to say that there is questionable parenting involved in this movie, just not necessarily with the main characters.
Or maybe with the main characters.
That's
given
true.
That they're
Yeah.
both like college dropouts who are working a dead-end job that is so dead-end it's closing.
Yeah, I mean, at that point it gets too real, though, because then it's like, doesn't everybody have questionable parenting if that's the bar?
The millennial plight at this point.
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's funny. This movie starts with a montage of old pictures, like black and white photos, and it made me. I just was thinking about it. Why are black and white old photos so scary? Because they do a really good job here of setting the mood right off the bat with just like kind of creepy music and some old photos, and it works.
Yeah. I think like to get a little meta and overarching about this, I think that's part of the reason I like this movie so much is that it leans way in to some really worn out scary movie, haunted house, New England creepy location stereotypes.
Sure.
And yet it still works. Like none of like you can watch it and you can point out like, well, that's like a cliche and that's like a move or a scene or a sort of vibe or trick or whatever that you see in a lot of these movies. But in this one, it still works. And I think that's why I have such an affection for it.
Well, I do find it fairly, well, first of all, these types of movies, I would put like Paranormal Activity in the same bucket as this. The movies where the fear is all on you. It's like if you are on board for this, then it is your mind is going to go crazy. And you are going to scare the crap out of yourself, in addition, more so than they could ever do in the movie. But if you are not on board for it, this movie is going to be the most boring thing you've ever watched in your life. And these movies work on these work on me. These are the ones where I watch them. I watched this last night where it was really windy. It had been raining all day. It was like midnight, and I would be lying if I didn't say that I watched an episode of Cheers before I went to bed after it was over, because it's the kind of scary where you start thinking about all of the nooks and crannies of your own house, and you start to distrust the space that you're in. And I thought for a movie with very little budget, I thought they did a really good job of building that sort of tension and fear.
Yeah, so I would say out of, this is the 10th movie that we have watched and discussed. I would say that, unless I'm forgetting one, I think this is the one that actually kind of scares me.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you.
In a way, yeah, that the other ones don't for whatever reason, and maybe part of it is the topic or the setting, or that things just get so outlandish and out of hand, or feel so constructed. Mm-hmm. And this one feels, again, as somebody who's born and raised and has lived in New England my whole life, this, it feels kind of familiar.
Right.
Like these places, these sorts of things and these sorts of people, and yeah, just the tone and the way they set up the scares in this. I think it works.
Yeah, and it's not, the setting too is, it's not an exceptional looking place. It's not like the Overlook where it's this massive labyrinthine, if that's the word, if I'm saying that correctly.
I think you are.
Maze of rooms and hallways. It's like bigger than a bed and breakfast, because like a bed and breakfast would be too small to be really that scary, but it's not so big that you end up getting into a Shining situation where it's just like, oh, the craziness of the space. It's like just big enough for stuff to happen on different floors and it to creep you out. Because I think that's where these movies live, these types of horror movies live, is where if you're in a space that is unfamiliar and big enough where every sound could be literally anything.
Yeah, and not being able to see clearly, like not having a sight line or some easy way to be like, oh, I know what that is. That's just the pipes in the bathroom upstairs. It's like, no, there's 3 floors and there's a basement. Mm-hmm. And it's big enough on each of those floors that if you hear a noise from quote unquote upstairs, it's like, okay, is that directly above me? Is it 2 floors above me where there are guests staying? Is it 3 floors above me? And no one is supposed to be up there. It's that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah, I think what they do really well, there's a quote from Christopher Lee that I heard him say on a commentary for this great old movie he did called I think it's called City of the Dead, or possibly I think the alternate name is Horror Hotel. I don't know. We might end up watching it because I really enjoy it. But
I was gonna say, I feel like I've heard of City of the Dead.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. It's from like 1960. It's a semi Lovecraftian thing that takes place. It's like half Lovecraft, half witches. It takes place in like fake Salem, sort of. It's a fun. It's a fun
like my
movie.
Kind of
yeah,
party.
I think you would enjoy it. But he was talking about. He said, the most terrifying thing on Earth is an open door, and I think he's 100% right, because it's the. It goes into. With this movie specifically, it goes into how they film in this movie, because they do something. I should say they don't do something that's one of my biggest pet peeves, is when they shoot in a scary movie situation full of, you've got these rooms and you don't know what's in the rooms. They always shoot them from inside the room, so you can see the people like peeking into the room, and I never find that scary. I find it so much scarier if you are following the person as they're going through the door.
Yeah, you're seeing it from their point of view.
Right, because you are then, if you are from the camera point of view inside the room, you've essentially, even if it's a dark room, you've essentially diffused any anticipation of what that room might be. Because it's just enough to kind of make it not that scary, because you are now somewhat familiar with the space. But if you're coming in through the door, you have no idea what's on the other side of that door. It could be anything. The best example of this, I mean, they do more or less the same thing in this movie, but the best example of this is in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, when they go up into the house and she opens that door and then like Bob is just there, and that's scary. Yeah. That's the scariest shit I've ever seen. David Lynch is really good at that stuff.
Oh yeah. No, you're totally right. And there's there's a thing that this movie does that there are these shots, and excuse my ignorance in terms of like the technical language of cinematography, but there are these shots that are sort of like they're not eye level with the actors. They're these sort of like mid-level, I want to say tracking shots, but I don't know if that's quite the right term, where it's almost like something that's kind of waist high is just sort of like smoothly and unnaturally like flowing through the air towards Claire usually.
Right.
It's this really, like, if you pay attention, they do it like 2 or 3, maybe 4 times in the whole movie, where it's like something moving at like waist or hip height, like through the air, kind of down the hallway at her. And I really enjoy it because it's this very unnatural position. Right. It's like, yeah, it's not a human perspective that you're getting, like, I'm walking towards somebody. It's this like very, it's in a weird perspective. It's in a weird sort of like gliding motion. And I think they use it to good effect at certain moments where otherwise it wouldn't really feel like a big deal, but they sort of throw them in every so often. And I appreciate them.
Yeah, I think the camera work as far as building that sense of tension and unease is really good overall, whether it's the stuff I was saying about the door or the camera movement, or they do this other thing that was actually really interesting. We can talk about a little bit more as we get into the characters, is there's a few moments where they're really effective at creating unease in personal relationships by just the way that they handle the camera. I'm thinking specifically of when Claire goes up to wake up, what the hell's his name? Jeff? No. What the hell's his name?
The guy, Luke?
Luke. Yes.
Luke.
She goes, after she has her first encounter, she goes up to wake up Luke, and he's, in his underwear because he's been sleeping, and he walks into his bedroom and just kind of sits on the bed in the darkness, and he says, "Come on in." But from her point of view, it very quickly becomes slightly uneasy and becomes I don't want to say threatening, but like there's a little less safety there than there is when they're both at work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I actually think threatening is a great word to use in that moment, because it's not that he's actively trying to be threatening, it's that she feels threatened. Right. And those are kind of like, I think that's like an interesting thing that this movie does throughout, where, as most movies are, with the exception of things like American Psycho, where you get a lot of first-person narration, you're by necessity and by the very nature of the thing, you're in this sort of third-person omniscient point of view. Right. But what this movie does that I like is that it puts you in Claire's mindset a lot. Like, you're sort of seeing things through her eyes. Almost exclusively. Yeah, exactly. So you're sort of like, she goes up, and if you saw that scene from Luke's point of view, it would be a very different, he'd be kind of probably freaked out and jarred by being woken up that way, and then he'd be a little bit nervous because he clearly has a crush on her, and he's like in his underwear and she's standing in the doorway. Right. It would be a scene you could almost play as like sort of like sweet and anticipatory, like, ooh, will they or won't they? Is this going to be a romantic moment? If it were from his point of view, but because it's from hers, there's something uneasy there that I think reflects like her mindset much more than it reflects his behavior.
Yeah, and it's an interesting choice, because with her point of view, you see that she is not super. She's not standoffish, but she is not quick to kind of let people in, it seems, or necessarily trust people, even if it's someone like Luke who she knows. Like, there's another instance where they create this element of unease with the camera, where she goes in to talk to Kelly McGillis, Lean. Leanne. They call her. Does she call her? He calls her Lee, right? She calls her Lee.
Lee.
I was confused. Yeah. It does read, now that I'm looking at it, it does read as Leanne, but I thought it was Lean because she kept saying Lee, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize she was saying Lean.
Her whole name sounds like 4 separate names. It's like Leanne Reese Jones, which is a very long name.
Yes. But she goes in and wakes her up and from out of her drunken pass out, whatever, blackout. No, I don't know, black. I don't want to assume. But
look, it's called Friday Night.
Yeah. And there's a moment where she opens up a drawer and reaches in the drawer to get something, and the way that they shoot it is the camera's positioned as such where it for a second becomes slightly threatening about what she's getting. Like, you don't know if it's going to be a Bible, you don't know if it's going to be a gun. You know, it's just it. I was surprised that just the placement of the camera was so effective at making me go, ooh, geez, I don't know what the hell's in there. And that's what you would kind of think in that situation if you're talking to someone and they just kind of someone you don't know, and then they go and reach into this drawer to pull something out. There's going to be a second where you go, oh shit, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, there's a lot. There's like an underlying current of paranoia through the whole thing. Because even the first time she meets Lee and she goes up to the room to bring her towels, and she's very excited because she's a fan and all of this different stuff. And she comes up and Lee comes out of the shower and Lee is just wearing a towel. Mm-hmm. And yet I have like a note where I feel like in that scene, Lee is more clothed than Claire is. Even though Claire is the one who's fully dressed and Lee is just sitting on the bed in a towel. Yeah. Because there's this moment where like Claire says something to her and then the camera just sits and like looks at Lee, and she's just smoking her cigarette and she's not reacting and she's not giving you anything. Right. And there's this moment where you could read any level of sort of malicious intent or like ill will into that scene, and I think it's really well done. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a good point to get into the characters. The two main characters in this movie are Claire and Luke, who work at the Yankee Peddler Inn, which is actually a real place, or I should say it was a real place in Connecticut. It still exists, but it has been closed since 2015. They closed in 2015 for renovations, and they have not opened since, and there is no plans to open it, which I'm sure you're bummed out about because I'm sure you would like to stay there. I am super bummed out because I would absolutely stay there. Yeah. That's where they shot it, too, so it's like it would look exactly like the movie. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so they Claire and Luke they work at the hotel. They're the only people there. The hotel is in the process of being shut down for good. And Claire is she's a very fragile character. She's a kind of a waif of a girl who could be anywhere from like 18 to 23, depending on, who knows. And she's got asthma that is brought on very easily by scaring her or other things. And Luke, her coworker, seems to be much older, and he is apparently into building a website about ghosts. And it's a very dated-looking website, which made me wonder when this was supposed to take place, because there's not a lot of like identifying markers for the time period which it takes place, but based on the website, it's like 1996. Yeah, that's. It's funny you should say that because I didn't really have that as a first thought, but I watched probably 5/6 of this movie with Greg, my husband, and that was his first he was like, wait a minute, does this take place in 1994? Yeah. When is this? Because he saw those websites and he also thought they looked even more dated than the 2011 release date would lead you to believe. And Luke is not super serious about ghosts, at least not the way that Claire is. And I don't know if you... when she goes onto his computer to try and find his ghost website and drops down the history tab. Oh, God. I don't know if you bothered to read what those were. I don't think you could avoid reading what his browser
that's good.
history has.
So then you won't be surprised or shocked when I read them all to you, because I paused it and wrote them all down. Luke has a history of questionable websites that have all taken precedence.
Oh, that's what we should have said.
Yes, that have all taken precedence over his ghost website, which include Butt Crumpets, home of the original.
Oh my God.
Jolly Jumping Pussies.
I thought you were joking about reading them.
Oh no, I wrote them all down. Jerky Blasters with a Z. The Spank Shaft. The Tit Punch.
Oh my God. No.
The Itty Bitty Titty Council, because I assume the committee was already a website taken. And my favorite of all of them, Tit Slap Tub Girl Soup. The Bang Pickup Truck, Chinese Pancakers, and Real Hauntings.
Oh. Wow. I feel like the Tit Slap Tub Girl Soup is the 2 Girls 1 Cup of the year 2011.
Yeah, it's got to be in that wheelhouse.
Oh my God.
But,
So just to finish establishing a little bit of these characters, these two main
I
characters.
feel like that covered it.
I mean, that covers Luke. That covers Luke 100%. Mm-hmm. But there's this. It's interesting because when it started, like when the movie starts and you're sort of unceremoniously introduced to these two and where they work and what's going on, it took me a minute to realize how much older I think Luke is than Claire. Like I knew right away that she looked very young. But yeah, it definitely took me a minute to realize the sort of the inequality between the two of them, where she clearly sees him as this like much older, more experienced, and she talks about, oh well, when you've seen what's the ghost name? It's like Mallory, Madeline? No, that's it,
Madeline O'Malley.
Madeline O'Malley. Thank you. I kept thinking Molly Malloy, which is a very different thing. Madeline O'Malley. And I have a note where, like, really early on between their interactions, I was like, oh, he never saw any ghost.
Right.
Like, you can pick up on it. I forget exactly what triggered me to think that. It was something about when she was like, well, when you saw her, blah, 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 did you whatever? And he was just like, well, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh.
And also, the website he's building, which is supposed to be Hauntings from the Hotel, is it's got one video on it, and the rest of it is completely, like, under construction, complete with, like, construction worker GIF and everything. So it's it's not something he's taking very seriously.
Right. You get these hints pretty early. These I shouldn't even say hints. These pretty clear indicators very early on that he is not as invested in the ghost story as she is. But you can tell that she doesn't see that.
Right.
Like she believes him and she wants to believe in him and she wants to believe they're kind of in this together and that he understands her and her interest in this. And he wants her to believe that because as we see later, he's got a giant creepy crush on her. Yeah,
she thinks the ghost stuff is cool, and he thinks that it's cool that the cute young girl is into him thinks the things that he's doing are cool, which then, as anyone who is a guy knows, will instantly develop into a crush almost immediately.
And that's how he becomes your terrible college boyfriend.
Yes, yeah. But how do you feel about their relationship overall? I know we're kind of like sidestepping the actual like ghost stuff, which we will get to, but I think what's really fun about this movie is there's so little. They give you so much without telling it to you. It's a lot of character interactions. It's a lot of you. Not just the scary stuff is stuff that you pull out, but the character relationships is stuff you actually have to like be aware of and pull from details. You know, what you're supposed to do in a moving picture story.
Yeah, no, but I think that's another reason why I know some people, their criticism of this movie is that they think it's boring because there aren't any real, there's a couple, there's several moments where there's tension or discomfort, but there's not a lot of ghost sightings for the first, I don't know, hour and 15 minutes of this hour and 40-minute long movie. And if you're looking for just, wall-to-wall scares and blood running up the walls and stuff, this is definitely not for you. But I like that this movie does what I think good narrative and good character work does, which is it shows you. It doesn't just spoon feed you. Yeah. So, like, you can pick up, like there's a moment where Claire says to Luke, do you ever think back on dropping out of college?
Yes.
And he says, every day. And it's kind of like, to me, that made me realize, like, oh, he dropped out of school, and I think she's dropped out of school.
Yeah, it's unclear where she is in her life so much.
Well, because Lee asks her, what are you doing? What are you gonna do? And she doesn't say, like, oh, this is my summer job, this is my part-time job, I'm just doing this before college. This is it. This job is all she has. She's not going to school. She clearly doesn't have, a boyfriend who's calling her. There are no friends trying to stop by to see her at the Yankee Peddler Inn. It's her relationship with Luke is the most intimate relationship we get to see in her life. And it leaves this, like, very yawning chasm of what else does she have, and now once this place closes, where does she go from there?
Right. Do you find their relationship to be at all creepy? Because it's tough because I don't necessarily find it creepy because he doesn't do anything. Like, he doesn't try to take advantage of her or anything. He clearly has some sort of crush on her, and he's playing up the ghost stuff because he knows that she likes it. But I don't know. I don't know if it's creepy past the fact that he's clearly older than she is.
So it's the sort of relationship that actually got less creepy to me as the movie went on.
Okay.
And his attraction to her became more text rather than subtext.
Sure.
There's the moment, so, they're spending these last few days of the inn being opened. They're the only two employees. The boss is like, don't call me. And they only have, at any given moment, they have a maximum of 2 guests.
Right.
And, there's the second floor rooms and the third floor rooms, which have already been stripped and emptied. So it's pretty empty, and it's just them kind of, wandering around this mostly abandoned inn. And then, of course, the inevitable, we're bored, and they both get drunk.
Sure.
So they get drunk together.
It seems like that's their last night, too. At least that's what the implication is.
Yeah, and it makes sense. I mean, I think at that point she's already kind of freaked herself out about stuff, and she's gone and woken him up and all of this. But when they get drunk, that is the moment where I sort of was like, oh no.
Right.
Like, I couldn't fully, I've only seen this movie once before, and it was a couple years back, and I couldn't remember where things went after that point. And I was like, this could be the moment where he goes from a little creepy to, like, full on creepy. And he has this moment where they're sort of drunkenly joking about her recording of when she was alone one night and she recorded the piano playing by itself.
Right.
And they're like jokingly call it like a reenactment of Claire's ghost encounter. And he's about to walk into the main room and he calls it the Yankee Pedophile Inn.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, oh no. But then he doesn't, like, they just kind of get drunk and they end up laying around that, like, living room area, and he's, like, in a weird way, very sweet.
Yeah. Well,
where he's like, I would do anything for you. Like, you're amazing. You're so
Yeah,
cool.
he's
And
pulling out-
it's very like,
he's pulling out the college boyfriend material right there, definitely.
he definitely is. But I think what I'm taking the long way around to say that I think part of why it reads as less creepy to me is that he is just as immature as she is.
Sure.
So there's not this like a gap in experience that's really clear.
Well, use that as sort of a segue into the ghost stuff. I do think there's again they give you so much without telling it to you in this movie. My takeaway was that him insisting that they get drunk was probably in the back of his mind. He's hoping something's going to happen, like they're going to get drunk and make out or something.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening, because he doesn't want to, he wants to make out with her, so he's going to go along with whatever she wants to do. They end up sitting in a terrifying basement, listening for ghosts, and he ends up hearing something. We don't even hear what he hears, but it scares the shit out of him, and it basically breaks him out of the I'm going to do anything I have to make out with this girl thing that people do in college. And he's just like, fuck it, I'm out. And I like that they don't like give you that background. You can kind of imprint his intentions and stuff onto it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I would also just like to say that was probably every first date that any boy ever had with me in college.
Well, you still, every time you go on vacation, you make your husband walk through a creepy cemetery. So I think it's still every date you currently go on, too.
That's absolutely true. Not to get too into a personal realm, but I've told you about one of the very early dates between me and my now husband, where he took me on the quote unquote tour of his house.
Oh, I think so. Yes.
Yeah, where he brought me via flashlight light only into the terrifying unfinished basement of his house that was built in the 1800s.
Yeah. It's a marvel that you're alive.
I went down that stairway thinking, he's going to cut my head off and put it in a freezer.
You bounded down those stairs, and he, as a serial killer, was like, it can't be this easy.
He's like, I'm going to skip this one. She's crazy. No, but there are those moments where I think the other thing is the actors. The acting is good enough.
It's really good.
The writing is good, and the acting is good enough that you can read their sort of their feelings and what they kind of hope or think is happening. You can see that very easily without it being really explicitly spelled out.
Yeah, I think she's great. I think the girl who plays Claire is very good. I did look up, and I did notice this as I was watching it, but I thought it was a choice, and apparently it's not. When they cast her, apparently they almost recast the role because they found out she couldn't scream. And when she did scream, it sounded like it was supposed to be funny. And the few moments that she does scream in this movie, like when she wakes up after the ghost appears, well, whether it's a dream or not, I don't know, but when the ghost appears in her bed, she kind of goes, ah! Like she has this weird like Muppet scream that she does. And I couldn't tell if it was intentionally supposed to be funny, but apparently not. Apparently she just can't scream.
Oh, I love that. I really, really love that. I love that that's a genuine thing from that actress and not just a character choice that they made.
Yeah.
Because, I also thought it was just a character choice where it would be like, she's got asthma. Of course she can't like full throat, big breath scream. Like I thought it made sense for the character, but I actually love that it's just how that actress lives her life, incapable of screaming.
Yes. But how do you feel about the actual ghost content? Because we were saying, your subconscious does a lot of work for this movie. It's a lot of open doors. The other thing that they do really well, similar on that open door front, is when she's going down a hallway, they keep some of the doors open So your eyes start
Yeah.
immediately darting to these little nooks and crannies off of the main path instead of it just being a hallway full of closed doors. It immediately makes things more foreboding. It's very good. But there is actual ghosts in this movie to some extent. It is a ghost story. How did you feel about the actual supernatural content?
So I think you probably know this by now that I am a fan of sort of less is more approach. I
Sure.
would rather see the ghost or the monster or whatever a little bit less than a little bit too much. So as much as part of me wishes there was a little more ghost content in this movie, but I would prefer that they err on the side of holding back. I will say that, so there are really two main ghosts in this. There's Madeline O'Malley, who's kind of the classic, it's 1870. She's in her whole bride outfit. She's got like a blood all over her face. But so there's her, and then there's the ghost of the third guest.
Right.
The older gentleman who comes and wants to stay in the honeymoon suite. And then later Claire finds that he has slit his wrists in the bathtub and he's committed suicide. He is terrifying.
Yeah.
You only see him as a corpse once. You see him when he's alive, and then you see him as a corpse once, and then you see him as a ghost just twice.
Right.
And he is really scary in a way that I think the Madeline O'Malley ghost is scary because she has those sort of jump scare moments where she sort of appears in the background behind somebody, or the music sort of builds up to sort of present her and make an entrance for her.
That first scene where she's under the sheet next to her in bed, very good. I thought that was a very good scare.
And I think that's one of the things I like a lot about this movie is that it doesn't, there's not a lot of crazy effects. They're not trying to do something super like meta or subversive or whatever. Like they're just trying to do kind of a classic ghost story, haunted house movie in a way that is effective. And I think they do that.
Well, it's funny. When I was thinking back about this movie, I realized my memory of it has no ghosts in it. I actually don't remember.
Really?
I didn't remember there actually being ghosts in the movie. What I remembered was
That's interesting.
I remembered the slow burn of everything, because in my head I was like, Innkeepers. I remember it being pretty okay, but I thought it was kind of boring. Because I didn't remember that there were actually ghosts that show up. Whether or not they're there, debatable.
Oh.
Could be in her head. I don't know. I like to think. I always like to think that there are ghosts there, but.
But I think it's fun that there is that question, like how much of it is ghosts, how much of it is her psychologically deteriorating.
Yeah. So watching it this time, was actually kind of surprised when they started showing ghosts. And because I remembered.
Oh, good.
I remembered the creepiness of it, and I remembered the way it ends, which is she ends up freaking out and running through the basement. And earlier in the movie, they set up this locked bulkhead door that she locks. And that ends up being the way she tries to get out of the basement. She can't get out. She has an asthma attack and she dies. I remembered that stuff because I remembered that being fairly effective. But I did not remember the ghosts at all. And so watching it this time, I almost kind of felt like they laid it on a bit too thick at the end. Because they give you the O'Malley ghost a couple times, and at the end you get the old man walking around the basement being creepy, and then she shows up.
Oh, he's so scary.
He is, and I'm glad that they do, because I think you have to pay it off in some way. It's I think the high watermark for movies like this traditionally is something like The Haunting, the original Haunting from like 1960 or something. Which,
oh my God, that movie's amazing.
Yeah, it's great. And they do so much of their work with sound design, which I would also like to talk about a little bit.
Yes.
Because they didn't have any special effects really that would be convincing. So it's a lot of sound design stuff and camera tricks. And they never I was just going to say, they never really give you any ghosts in that movie. There's like one jump scare, but that's about it.
Yeah.
And this...
No, I'm so happy that you ended up being surprised by this movie in some way, because when we were finishing up our recording for the previous episode, and I revealed to you that this was the movie that I had chosen, I could hear in your voice where you were sort of like, oh, okay, well, we're going to watch The Innkeepers. I was like, oh shit, Clay hates this movie.
I wasn't that down on it. No, but my memory...
He's so bored.
My memory of it was that it was kind of creepy, but it was also kind of boring. And I went into it this time assuming I was going to have the same reaction. I was like, all right, maybe I'll watch half of this movie tonight and I'll finish it tomorrow because I'll probably fall asleep. I was into it the whole time. I was
good.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. And the ghost stuff that they do give you, I think at this point in history, you kind of have to pay it off a bit. It's really difficult to pull something off like this and not pay it off. I've seen modern movies that try, and I don't think that they're very successful. Mileage will vary. But I think one of the cool things that they do in this is the stuff with the EVP recordings that they do, and that's where the sound design comes in. Because I was going to talk about, we like to talk about the music and stuff. The music is fairly unremarkable. It's fairly run-of-the-mill. It's not bad. It's just like it's, ghost story music. It's not anything to write home about.
I enjoy it because I think, again, it's sort of leaning into all the tropiness and everything of the whole thing.
But
it's a New England inn, so we're going for full classic haunted house music.
Yeah, it just doesn't. I expect that sort of thing, I guess. So it doesn't stand out to me the way, say, like the soundtrack to Starry Eyes does. It's just it's there.
Okay.
What does stand out to me, though, is the sound design, which is, I think, the star of this movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because they give you, when they start doing their EVP recordings and, people are wearing headphones and they've got the microphones and stuff, they get you right into the headphones and they do auditorily. Sure. Let's use that.
Yes, that is a word, and you said it correctly.
Excellent. They do auditorily what they do visually as far as making you work for the scare. Because they do that thing where you now become the person in the headphones with the volume turned all the way up. So all you can hear is just the hum of the ambient noise. And you end up doing the same thing you do when you're looking into the dark corners of the room, where your ears just start straining for something. And you just keep waiting for something to happen, so you start getting a chill up your own spine, even though nothing's happened. And then they give you something. When they give it to you, I thought it was actually really effective. It's not, they don't do any jump scares. It's like such an easy place to do a jump scare, but they don't. They just give you creepiness that all helps build towards the end of the movie.
Yeah, and there are the more obvious moments, like when Claire puts on the headphones and she really can just kind of hear that sort of weird, it's not like a crackle, but it's that sound when you crank the volume way, way up and you're like straining to listen for something. But there's even moments where, like, when she rings the service bell on the desk. And she rings it and it kind of like holds this, like, even as it like goes and fades out, it holds this like one really high pitched but like subtle note, like longer than you would expect.
Yeah.
And there are these little interesting things like that, like when a door creaks open or a floorboard creaks, where they just kind of, they tweak it ever so slightly to just draw a little extra attention to those things.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to pull something like this off now unless you're really going to focus on it. Because, horror movies try to get you with the sound coming from a different room kind of thing, and it's never scary. It's only there to be a motivating thing to get some idiot to walk into a room and get stabbed or whatever, It never works anymore. But with this one, when the sound design becomes part of the focus that they're putting their effort into, that's when it really starts to work. And I was just really impressed by it. I'm really glad we watched this because I think I love this movie.
Yeah, this movie is really good. That's one of the reasons I wanted to watch this, is when I kind of was going through the list. I mean, weeks ago when we were first starting out on this endeavor, and we had kind of come up with the idea of doing our own suggestions every few episodes. I was like, oh, well, this is going to be really hard because it's the 200 best horror movies. Everything I want to watch is going to be covered. And then this was definitely one of the first ones that I thought, like, oh yeah, this is probably like, this is like 165 or whatever. And then I went through the list and I was like, wait, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, this is a good, scary movie.
It's got a higher rating than even adjusted score. It has a higher rating than everything in the bottom 10 on the list.
I believe that completely.
This has a higher rating than The Ring.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That one actually surprises me.
Yeah. So I guess we can jump into that then. Do you think that this deserves to be on the list?
I absolutely do.
If I'm looking at this bottom 10, oh man, it's weird because this bottom 10 has good movies in it. Like it's 190 through 200 has Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Jacob's Ladder, The Mist, Basket Case. You know what? Get Phantasm the fuck out of here. I don't like Phantasm. I would happily sacrifice Phantasm to put this movie in.
But I think even beyond the bottom 10, there are some movies on this list
It's got a higher rating. I'm sorry. It's got a higher rating than the bottom 20.
Yeah. Well, and what I was going to say is there are some movies on this list that are still great movies,
sure,
and have all sorts of plethoras of virtue and whatever you want to say, but are they necessarily horror movies or scary movies?
Sure.
Like sort of the debate we had when we did American Psycho of like, is this a quote unquote scary movie? Is this a horror movie? Does this belong on this list, or does it belong on a different list?
Right.
And so there's kind of that push and pull too, where it's like, if we're talking about the 200 best horror movies, how is this one not on it?
Right.
But some other stuff that's kind of questionably even classified as a horror movie,
The Haunting
is making it on
The
there.
Haunting also not on the list. So we might have to go back
Really?
and do that one at some point.
Yeah, we should. That would be fun.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna. There's one last thing I meant to mention earlier,
Yeah.
and it's about characterization through like visual cues. And I think this movie does such a great job of that, where the characters you really see are, I mean, it's maybe 6 people total.
Yeah, just about
through the whole movie, which is great. But there's this like attention to detail in the way the characters are physically presented that I really appreciate, especially with Claire. Because she's got her Yankee Peddler maroon polo shirt that she has to wear as part of her uniform. But over the few days that this movie takes place, she's also only ever wearing the same pair of jeans. She's got socks. I mean, shoes with no socks. She's got one pair of pants. She has, like, her nail polish is so chipped off.
Yeah, yes.
That it's almost gone. She just has this very undone presentation.
Yeah.
She's got her chipped nail polish. Her hair is also, like, as somebody who's had many, many different lengths of hair, that's not a haircut. Like, that is somebody growing out a pixie cut.
Sure.
But it's not a decision she made about herself.
That's an interesting way to put it. Yes, I can see that.
So I appreciate those little details about how she's sort of not put together and doesn't have an aesthetic or a direction.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting visual characterization.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think that stuff plays into, like, again, they do such a good job visually of giving you that story without telling it to you. I think that plays into the reception of this movie, which is the last thing I want to talk about. Because usually we talk about, like, oh, who would you recommend this movie to? And it's tough because, like I said at the beginning, you really have to be in the mindset to watch this movie. It's not flashy. There's not a lot of, gory stuff. They're not throwing a lot of story at you. You're just sort of like marinating in the setup or in the environment, and it's counting on you to do a lot of the work. And I don't think that makes it a bad movie. I think it makes it something that you actually have to sit with and consider. And so I'm not surprised, especially given the people who like to rate this stuff on like IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes and stuff. I'm not surprised that those people don't like this movie. Not that I don't want to generalize, but it doesn't seem like they're necessarily their cup of tea. Because it is a fairly you don't see a lot of movies like this anymore, and especially in the horror genre. It's usually a lot flashier. So recommending it is tough for me. What do you think?
Yeah, it is a difficult, like, it doesn't fit neatly into any specific boxes. But I think it's a good movie for people who are fans of classic, like, horror movies and haunted house movies. I think those folks would enjoy this.
I think so.
Anybody
too.
who likes, like, sort of local urban legendy kind of, like, historical hauntings. Yeah,
I would agree with that. Definitely. So I think that's going to do it for our coverage of the Innkeepers. There was one other thing that I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to wait because I am going to put my thumb on the scale a little bit for next week. I had hit the randomizer, and it had landed on number 150, which is The Others, which I was also very excited to do that because I haven't watched that in a while, and I really like that movie. However,
I like that movie a lot.
I'm going to put my thumb on the scale and say next time we do House of the Devil, because I think it would be interesting to watch these two movies by Ty West back to back and kind of maybe compare them a little bit and maybe talk about him and why maybe we think he hasn't quite broken out yet. Because I looked at his IMDb page, and the last movie he did was let me pull it up here. The last movie he did was in 2016, and for the past 4 years he's just been doing television. And everything before that, he did a couple bits of TV, but he did mostly movies. And a lot of movies that were relatively well received, or actually very well received, House of the Devil being chief among them. So I think doing the back-to-back will be interesting. And to see, especially because you haven't seen House of the Devil, and I'm interested to see what you think of it. So calling an audible, and next week we will be doing, if that's okay with you anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So next week we'll be doing number 143, which is Ty West's House of the Devil. So thank you guys for listening. Amanda, do you have any final thoughts you want to put out there before we sign off?
I do not.
Excellent. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Amanda, thank you for joining me, and we will see you next time with House of the Devil.
Bye, everybody.